One of the ways that you make money as an investor is to take advantage of situations where you have a mispricing of assets. Because if the market perceives, let's say, a stock to be worth more than it is, that there's something flawed in their analysis and it's causing the market to overprice an asset, that gives you an opportunity to make money by selling that asset. Same thing as a buyer. If the market fails to assign an appropriate value to a particular stock, if you believe that the market is wrong and that the stock is worth a lot more than what the current market price would indicate, well, now you have an opportunity to take advantage of that misperception, because you could buy the stock at a much lower price than what the stock is worth. Well, I think that is exactly what's happening right now on a much broader scale, because all sorts of asset classes entirely, not just individual companies, but asset classes are extremely mispriced because the market really has no idea what's about to happen and how it's going to impact the value of those assets. It reminds me a lot of the subprime mortgage bubble, because early in that bubble, 2004, 2005, 2006, it was apparent to me that the market had mispriced these bonds, that the bonds were trading actually above par, when in my opinion, they were worth zero. I understood the dynamics behind these securities and the housing market, which ultimately was how these securities derive their value. I knew that when real estate prices dropped, and that a drop was inevitable, but that was something that buyers of mortgages couldn't even conceive was a possibility. I knew that when prices dropped, there would be a wave of defaults and that these securities would ultimately be worthless, and that created an opportunity to short them. And there were several other investors who achieved a degree of fame and fortune by coming to the same conclusion. But the reason that people were able to sell these mortgages that were basically worthless and sell them at above par was because the vast majority of investors were clueless as to what was actually going on. And it's those same clueless investors that are now overpaying for U.S. bonds, for the U.S. dollar, for U.S. stocks, and who are undervaluing things like gold and silver and maybe emerging markets and value and dividend paying stocks relative to growth stocks. And before I get into the economy, which I noticed was the topic of my talk, the recession that everybody denies exists, I want to start off by talking about inflation, because that's actually the bigger problem, and that's what's driving the recession, and it's what's also driving, I think, the misconception as to how assets should be priced. Going back to the beginning, for years, the Federal Reserve told us, the public investors, that the problem was inflation was too low, that the Fed had decided that 2% inflation was its target. It was no longer a ceiling where inflation had to be below 2%, which is where the 2% even came from. The Fed decided to redefine that ceiling as a target. And the Fed told us that we needed 2% inflation, that anything less was unacceptable, that somehow if the cost of living did not rise by 2% every year, it was bad for the economy, that if the cost of living only went up 1.5%, that was a problem. The problem that the Fed was going to solve by making sure that the cost of living went up by 2% per year. And the way the Fed was going to deliver on that promise was through monetary policy. So the Fed kept interest rates at zero, and they continued quantitative easing because inflation was still below this target that they decided was somehow the economic sweet spot when it comes to inflation, that we need to accept a 2% increase in the annual cost of living because anything else could be economic disaster. So the Fed pursued this policy. Then, when the Fed actually achieved its goal, when inflation started to come out at 2% or even slightly above, the Fed did not declare victory. No, the Fed said it still had more work to do, because the Fed said that even though we're at 2% inflation now, that's not good enough. We need to make up for all the years that inflation was below 2%. So that's when the Fed all of a sudden redefined its 2% target to a 2% average. The Fed said that inflation must average 2% over time. And because we had so many years below 2%, well, now we need to have years above 2% to average all that low inflation back up to 2%. Now, of course, all this was nonsense from the very beginning. I said that it was nonsense that the Fed claimed that we needed 2% inflation, that 2% inflation was not better than 1% inflation. Actually, the opposite. 1% is better than 2%, and 0 is better than 1%, and minus 1% is better than positive 1%. When it comes to the cost of living, the lower the better.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now
I have bad news for you. If you're not rich by now, you're screwed. And if you're in debt, you're even double screwed. How so, you might wonder? Well, the sad truth is that you're working your whole life to make someone else rich. The mega corporations, the banks, the politicians, everyone is getting richer. They get your money. And what is even worse, they get your time, they get your life. You are not even in a rat race, you're in a financial prison. But what could a solution for you look like? Honestly, I don't know, but I know what a solution for me would look like. It's very simple. I use whatever money I have and I multiply it with 1,000. This could make my life much easier and probably yours as well. If you have $1,000 available and multiply this with 1,000, I believe that this could solve some financial issue for the one or the other. Of course, if you're ugly, you would have to multiply it with much more than 1,000. My name is Markus Dan, and this is what I decided to do. I decided to 1000x my money. This is not a joke. I know what you may be thinking. What is this guy talking about? How should this work? This is not possible. Well, I made a detailed video where I laid out my plan. And some clever folks might even want to look at this plan and copy it and do exactly what I do. This is just a little hint on the side. You have two options. You leave, you forget what you have seen. You do whatever you're doing and you hope that somehow you get some other results. Good luck with that. Or you click the link below the video. You enter your email address, because I'm not showing this to everybody. You at least watch my video on how I plan to 1000x my money. The choice is yours. Make the right choice. Join me. See what a different future you could have. See at least how I intend, how I plan to do the 1000x. So click on the link below, enter your email address, and I see you on the other side. Your Markus Dan.